Low price of gas could be good for your car tank and maybe your heating oil tank, but bad for the province's bank account. Finance Minister Ross Wiseman gave his update yesterday and says this year's provincial budget deficit is expected to be almost $400 million more than expected, up to $916 million. Mr. Wiseman put the blame on oil and made it clear that the province has zero control over global oil prices. Trevor Taylor is a longtime Tory who sat in Danny Williams' cabinet when things looked much better than they do today. Mr. Taylor, good morning.
Morning, Anthony.
Jen Dion is the provincial treasurer for the NDP. She also wants to run for the NDP in the next election in Placentia St. Mary's. Good morning.
Good morning.
And Simon Lono is looking for the Liberal nod in Signal Hill, Kitty-Vitty, and he's here in the studio with me as well. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Trevor Taylor, I'll start with you. You're on the phone. What did you think when you heard these numbers yesterday?
Well, I guess I wasn't at all surprised. I disappointed to see the numbers creep back up to where they were when we took over back in 2003, and I guess it really points out how volatile and how dependent, and this is a profound statement of the obvious, but how directly related to the price of oil our fiscal house is connected, and it highlights for me anyway that it's unwise of any government to spend every cent that comes in, because the world oil market is such a fickle place and volatile at the best of times, and these are not the best of times.
Simon Lono?
Well, it's interesting to say that, for him to say that this government, it's unwise for government to spend every dime that comes in of non-renewable resources, and yet that's exactly what's happened in this case. We've had a government in place here that has taken every dime of non-renewable resources and shoveled it out the door as fast as they possibly could. What happened to planning? What happened to being conservative with public funds, being the prudent stewards of the public purse? That has completely gone out the window, and it's gone out the window under this administration.
Jen Dion?
Well, what's going to be on the chopping block out this window, Simon? I mean, last year's budget brought some very needed funding in for students, for seniors, for low-income families. And my concern is, what is this deficit going to mean in terms of what's going to be taken away that has already been promised and needed by the people?
Well, the Premier did say he'll have to make some corrections. Where does he go about correcting?
Well, I suspect that probably the place he's going to go correcting is in the capital budget. What you're going to see is roads not paved. What you're going to see is maintenance delayed, deferred, those kinds of things, because you can do that and not annoy the people who are working for you by cutting their jobs or cutting their salaries. So I suspect, because that's happened before under this government, where they were predicting huge deficits and managed to save it at the last minute by putting off maintenance. And I suspect that's what's going to happen again this year.
And that's going
Simon,
to be...
With all due respect, Simon, this government didn't shovel, every cent of money out the door as soon as it came in. You look at the history of the Tory rule in this province, and I'm not campaigning like you two are. I'm done with politics, unlike you two. But anyway,
too bad.
The record speaks for itself. There was a substantial amount of money, with much protesting by Liberals and New Democrats, I might add. A fair chunk of money paid down on the provincial debt over the course of the Tory tenure since 2003. Some of that has crept back up, unfortunately, in part because of lower production numbers on times and lower oil prices right now. But it does, Ms. Dion, I'm sorry, I missed your first name.
Jen.
Did point out, what is the plan of Liberals when they expect to take over next year? I don't know if they will or not, but all the polls are suggesting that. But somebody will have to make some very difficult choices, and I hope that it's not, as Simon pointed out, and we weren't the only government that did that, by the way, cut back on capital projects, because that was the modus operandi for Liberals prior to taking over, our taking over. But there needs to be a substantial. Only way, you can't overreact to this. This is a short term, but the short term will be 3 to 5 years. There's no doubt.
Well, I think. Well, I mean, you talk about the record, and let's look at the record for a second. Last year, government predicted a $105 barrel per oil price, which is at historic high levels. Despite that, government was still looking at a $500 million deficit. We're not not looking at a $900 million deficit that came out of nothing. We're looking at that went from $500 million in the red to $900 million in the red when we had high oil prices. Now, if that's not an example of bad planning and irresponsible fiscal management, I'm not sure exactly what is.
Well, Simon, the Liberal plan of cutting back on capital projects, you can't just say that that's an easy fix, because that's going to roll down to the people. We have desperately needed facilities for a new Waterford hospital, a new hospital on the West Coast, and the road situation. I mean, don't even get me started about how that impacts the lives of Newfoundlanders.
Well, we're not going to have any idea what needs to be done and how it's going to happen until we get somebody to really look at these books and figure out what's going on. Because one thing that's absolutely sure is that government predictions aren't worth the paper they're printed on.
Trevor Taylor, you want to get in on this?
Well, I beg to differ on the government projections. Government projections over the course of the past 10, 12 years have been pretty darn close to the reality at the end of the day.
On December 12th, 2012...
Hang on, let me finish, Simon. I sat quietly and listened to you. So you sit quietly and listen to me now. The projections have been pretty good over the course of time. But, it doesn't matter right now whether projections were correct or incorrect. The fact of the matter is we're faced with a $900 million deficit. Those kinds of numbers are probably going to be the reality without changes for the course of the next 2 to 5 years. So somebody will have to make some decisions. You can't overreact. I saw Wade Locke's comments there yesterday, and he's right. You can't overreact, but you can't not react. You can't just go at this little bit, itty bitty. The unfortunate thing about this, it comes at probably the worst possible time. And that is that we're running into an election year. So the government will be adverse to making bold moves, and the opposition will sit quietly, with the exception of Simon, and Jen yapping at them, nipping at their heels about what they're not doing. The unfortunate thing is somebody needs to say what they're going to do and get on with it in budget 2015.
I totally agree, Trevor.
That is the problem. We'll condemn the government for what they're not doing. That's what will happen by the Liberals in particular over the course of the coming months, and the PCs will be, I suspect, a little gun shy because where they are in the polls, they don't feel that they're empowered enough to make the kind of moves that they need to make.
Trevor Taylor, that's your summation. I'm going to give just about a half a minute to the other two people part of this panel. Jen?
Well, that's exactly, I agree with you, Trevor, and as Simon said, somebody needs to come up with a plan, and what we have been very vocal about saying where government's priorities need to go. It can't be to spending cuts to programs that are desperately needed by the people. And I would, for one, really like to hear how the Liberals are going to deal with this.
Simon?
I'm sorry to say that the NDP have absolutely no credibility on this anymore. They basically have no plan at all, and are only talking about let's pull money out of fictitious corporations, fictitious money there, and solve the problem, and not affect the budget at all.
No,
but the fact is that we've had a government here that has decided to spend every dime, and they've gone to the high level of every prediction out there. So we need to be far more conservative and stop being irresponsible with our money.
All right, I got to wrap it up there. Very good discussion. I appreciate all three of you taking part. Thank you very much, Trevor.
No problem. Thanks a lot.
Jen Dion, Simon Lono, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Trevor Taylor, former provincial Tory cabinet minister. Jen Dion, running for the NDP, she hopes, in Placentia St. Mary's. Simon Lono, looking for the Liberal nomination, Signal Hill, Kitty Vitty.